And we're back. Welcome to Print Your Games, the podcast for what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm your host, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by
Kristen Sowards, also known as Lost Spheres.
We also have a awesome guest for us, a person who is responsible for at least 5 of my last 6 nightmares. Scott from Comet Lord Miniatures. Hey, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
For those who do not know, could you give us the quick pitch about what Comet Lord Miniatures is?
Well, I think you've covered that. I'm a sculptor of nightmares. So I sculpt miniatures for tabletop games, and I usually try to stay in the realm of dark fantasy, cosmic, gothic, and body horror. I think that would cover it.
That's a pretty good description of the many fascinating and terrifying reasons that I do indeed love your artwork. So thank you for joining us on the show. Obviously, it's for 3D printing. You sell these as STL files on your website. You also have a Patreon subscription, right?
Yep.
All the fun stuff. And you're also available on Tribes and all of the fun stuff. So, Scott, please tell us, how did you get into gaming and how terrifying was it?
I started playing tabletop games. I think it was just before college, and I originally got into GURPS.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yes, GURPS.
Yeah, my friends back then were real number crunchers, and I think the majority of my time was spent just customizing the system. And then I ran my friends through basically my own take on Dark Souls, but probably I don't want to claim worse, but it's
was that with GURPS or was it with some other system?
That was with GURPS, and then
wow.
So did you just use the horror base book, or did you just what source books did you use?
From my understanding, it was just the basic, and I customized.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
For any of our listeners unfamiliar with GURPS, it is the generic universal role-playing system. It is a RPG from the good old days, and I have many fond memories with all the amazing amount of math required to play that game. It was not. Also, it gave me an appreciation for hex-based combat.
Yeah. Yeah, and I went from GURPS to playing 5e. And 5e with a couple of college classmates, and then what a 180 from full math to full just do whatever you want. And
right.
And then we landed on Pathfinder first edition, and I kept that setting kept getting transferred over. But eventually I came up with my own setting, which a lot of my creations kind of stem from.
Right. So you mentioned an appreciation for Dark Souls. It definitely shows through in your artwork that you have a love of the souls, and definitely some Bloodborne. I definitely see some influence there too. Is that an incorrect assumption?
I mean, I'd be lying if the Comet Lord didn't come from my time with Bloodborne.
So sorry,
go for it.
I was just gonna say, it looks like you also maybe had a little bit of Planescape influence, or is that just your 5e days? Because like you have Slot and a whole bunch of other planar critters. So I was curious if that came in, or was it just how you ran 5e?
I'm actually not even sure where it came from, other than probably opening up the monster manual, looking at like Slot, and going like, "That's awesome."
Yeah, no, that's cool. I was just like, it's a definite vibe. If people are big time Planescape fans, they almost all look at your minis and are just like, holy crap. And then you also have some cool like Warforged looking things with those winged kind of like I don't know. It reminds me of the Lord of Blades a little bit. I don't know.
It definitely was my take on it, and I remember the stream fondly and with a bit of apprehension where I was asking people like, oh, what should I do with this thing? And someone's like, oh, saw blade wings. I'm like, fine, sure.
So
Why not?
It's over the top, but I love it. I love it. Yeah, I actually found you from these, and I'll say what I'm showing to people. But spiritual weapons was a keyword search, and one of the cool things that he does is like almost is it probably 1 or 2 minis per set has the spiritual weapon add-on, sometimes more.
Yeah, usually if something has a weapon, I might as well turn it into a spiritual weapon. There's the odd time where like a fire giant smith or the fire genasi smith, where it's like, well, I guess we'll have an anvil as a spiritual weapon,
right?
Because why not?
Yeah, anvil. There's a chain sword. There's all sorts of cool pole arms, ranseurs, short swords. I was just like almost any weird because I've played for a long time and when you homebrew a lot and write content, the favorite weapon of the deity, people are always trying to draw out that new weird thing, and that's what your spiritual weapon's supposed to look like. So I was like, holy cow, almost anything I've ever made is represented. And it's been very useful because we have a TK fighter who's using weapons like this in our game right now. So,
as someone who played a war priest, and I basically was a walking armory with different weapons, and I think my DM even gave me a weapon that it could magically shift into other weapons.
Nice.
I think it makes sense why I do it.
Alex agrees. Alex in chat agrees with you all that everyone needs giant demon frogs, and I also do love the slot and was not aware of their Planescape connection. I just love their art in 3rd edition so much that they just became a staple of my games. It's like, and now the giant evil frogs come.
I mean, I think in Planescape, every monster type was kind of every plane had its like native monster type, and that was the Chaos Plains native monster type before Pathfinder did Proteans, which I also adore. And I have no problem with there being 2 Chaos type monsters in my games. So,
and James in chat says, "TK Fighter in the house. Thanks for the weapons."
Yes, that would be the TK Fighter player right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I had to describe your art style, it would definitely be elegant and refined. Even your horrific monsters of my most horrific nightmares, even they have your sculpts are very clean. It's obvious that everything's been done with purpose. Even the horrible mutilations and bulging tentacles, it's not like, and then sloppily green stuff tentacle. It's like everything, it has like this refinement. What was your background in art before you started mini sculpting?
So I went to college for digital multimedia, and it was a sort of catch-all program of doing like video editing, web design, and 3D computer graphics. But I actually didn't start sculpting we didn't officially start sculpting until I took it as kind of a side project in like 2nd year, I think it was. But I definitely was the classmate who found the Mudbox program in our like package of software and was just completely amazed by it. And then my 3D instructor, he started sculpting just from a sphere on the like projector while we were all working. And I found myself just watching the sculpting more than doing my actual work of like animating a solar system, like just spheres spinning around. So I could clearly tell where I was wanting to go. And I think I just let it consume me for the next like few years. And I tried to work in video games. I only got a few freelance jobs. I even went to like GDC looking for jobs.
Was that like character design work or animating work, or what was it?
I was going for character design. I did eventually get hired for an animation job for environments, which I don't do scenery, so you can tell that really didn't stick.
Yeah.
I don't know. Occasionally you have scenery attached to your characters. There's this like Clockwork Knight covered in coffins that was one of my favorites.
Oh yes, the Crypt Keeper. It's my homage to homage to, is it Thanatos from Persona 3? Or I guess it's just the Persona series, and I wanted my Dark Souls take on it, I guess.
There is indeed Japanese gaming influence. Guys, I was also going to say many of your characters would make awesome Castlevania villains.
Thank you.
I can see that.
I like to imagine that if the D&D players went into a crypt and obviously you got that statue holding two swords looming over, they're obviously going to be suspicious of it. But what they don't expect maybe is that the whole room is actually just weaponized like coffins.
And that is cool because another one of the strengths of your sculpting, of what you offer on your Patreon, is that this would be an awesome, in any other Patreon, the giant Clockwork Knight surrounded by chained coffins would be an awesome character, and that would be the only sculpt I get of it. Right. But your knight is posed as like you've got a resting pose and then an action pose and then just I'm posing pose, like I'm flexing here, and then we get not only like 4 poses for that one character. We get his sword as a spiritual weapon, and the coffins are available as separate, like elevated floating chained coffins, and then of course as actual coffin scenery that can be included in the game, including a version of it where the coffin has been removed to beat my players to death with. Like, I get so much flexibility with each of your characters every time you do put out a little release.
It's true.
I do try to like plan it around the idea that someone's going to use it in their game, and it's that little flair, right? If you can just kind of remove the coffins, or maybe the DM wants to fill the room with, maybe they're exceptionally evil and like 20 coffins, and they're just showing like, this thing's still got more coffins to throw at you as the number of them's dwindling down as your fighters or barbarians trying to bust through them all.
Very dramatic quiver of coffins, so to speak.
Yeah.
I often talk that occasionally I'll run into a miniature that makes me make an encounter. Like my favorite go-to example of it is the Frost Giant riding mammoth miniature that Wizards put out ages ago. It's like I opened up the random pack, pulled that mini out. I'm like, I don't know why my party's going to fight this, but they're going to fight this. And so many of your characters, like the Coffin Knight, are exactly that. And then when I see the floating coffins, I'm like, this is a boss fight, and I'm going to have the floating coffin stage, and then he's going to like jump down from the ceiling and wield the coffins, and it's becoming a Castlevania villain is what it's becoming. Konami might as well have co-sponsored this encounter. And you give me all these options, and I would not have had anywhere near the imagination to make an encounter like that had you not like been so extra with everything you put up to offer.
Yeah, and all the dynamic energy you embed in there. It's just it's you're doing so much heavy lifting to start a DM or whoever off. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I admit I'm trying to get the most out of my miniatures because it does take me a while to make each of them, and as an indie creator, I definitely can't put out like 40 miniatures a month. But if I'm going to give you extra stuff or like extra poses and spiritual weapons or floating coffins, I do want to think about like, how are you going to use this? Is this going to be useful? Also, a lot of the poses, like yes, some of them are definitely more display pieces, but I do also want them to be something you drop on the, don't drop it on the table, put it on the table, and all your players go like, oh crap.
Yeah.
It's boss time. We're like,
Well, in the dynamic posing, they're all lunging. They're very kinetic. All the sculpts, and so just immediately looks like, oh crap, the thing's coming at me. Like I've seen like very emotive responses. I did a bunch of your constructs in a couple fights, and people were like, it's very intense. Speaking of intense, do we want to ask Alex this question?
Alex is wondering, do you make evil foxes?
I have not yet, though. As it's been voiced already, you might not want me to.
Right. I mean, Alex, look what he did to bunnies. I am now showing this nightmarish. What's this thing called again, Kristen?
The Osterbeast.
The Osterbeast, which is. Okay, this isn't like the little like Vorpal bunny monster. This is like a 20-foot tall, horrific abomination that reminds you of. If you've ever been to an Easter party in the 70s and somebody wore the costume that made you scream and run from Easter eggs for the remainder of your childhood, that was about halfway to how scary this were bunny is.
Do you have the view that shows the chest cavity at all? Because it gets worse if you look underneath.
And even it's available in multiple poses. It's oh god, this thing is. Why do you do this to me? I mean, I love it because my players will never forget the time that they TPK'd to the Osterbeast.
Well, yeah, like I always cringe a little bit when someone's doing a joke encounter, like, oh, we're doing a Halloween game or a Christmas game or a whatever game. But like when it's something like that, it's not cringing anymore. That is freaking horrifying. And you put that out there and all the fun haha, it still becomes a very intense, cool encounter, and you can still kind of yuck about it later because it's the Easter Bunny kind of. But
like I've had a few people request like, oh, can you do like holiday things? And I always, I kind of not sure about it because it's very one time a year it's going to be popular, and then you're going to use it once, most likely.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry to all the players out there that have to witness the Osterbeast multiple times, but it's I want to make it into something that, like, maybe you went into the Shadowfell and some poor rabbit fell in there and turned into this. I don't know. Like, you can still use it in other places, and it's a scary monster, even if you kind of avoid the fact that it's the Easter Bunny.
If ReZero can make bunny scary, you can make bunny scary.
So here's a question for you about the chest cavity. Is it putting the eggs inside the chest cavity or taking them out? Because I'm just not sure.
So
is that left to the imagination and horror of the players when they see it?
So I was trying to work out the lore, and I would like to venture into like setting up modules and PDFs someday. But the idea I had was that this is some sort of lycanthrope, some offshoot, like ancient, like bloodline. I don't know what to call it. Whoever went through this transformation, as shown in the pictures, like there's bones jutting out everywhere. It's a horrible process.
It's horrible.
It's got extra arms. It's got extra arms.
Well, it has little egg arms that deal with the egg tummy thing.
So the idea was that this thing, what drives it, maybe it's obsessed with eggs now because it's the Easter Bunny. And maybe you could come up with a quest where maybe a golden dragon is like, you got to go get like my egg back. An Easter Bunny stole it, and it's like the party's like, oh sure, like we can handle that. Then they go and they're like, oh no.
Or maybe it rips your still beating heart from your chest and wraps it in an egg to take home.
I was going with the kind of cuckoo approach where it was actually finding other creatures' nests and putting its eggs, which actually hatch into more of it. You
We
know?
do not need more of it in existence. We do not need more Oster beasts out there.
All these ideas like came up, and I do want to leave it for interpretation for DMs to use, because
Right.
like I love the idea that this thing is some weird like I want to call it a parasite where like it plants its eggs, and you know that rock bird like suddenly finds all its eggs are gone, and
there's
like
a thing, yeah.
like, and so the idea I originally thought was like it's keeping the eggs safe, and I statted it so that if you break an egg near it, it just goes berserk at you. But it could also, maybe the eggs are magically appearing and it's just constantly producing eggs out of its chest cavity for its little baby arms to throw. Sentences you never thought you'd actually have to say out loud.
Right. I was just thinking Paramount could be like a nest of chocobos, right? And then like it's like Parasite, putting its little, and then hatches and eats all the baby chocobos. You'd like that, right?
That'd be great. That'd just be wonderful. And while you do the terrible nightmare beasts, the hero minis, or at least I don't know if they're heroes, but the other minis that you release, the more elegant side, just have this like aura of coolness that's just built into them. I'm pulling up just your take on knights. What's these? The Barathi, the Baratharan knights, which this convinced me to pledge in this particular set, because these knights look so awesome, and like they're elegant. They've got folded plates. They kind of look like they could absolutely fist fight a Gundam. And again, this is one of the models that you provided in like a billion poses with swords, and so even when like especially when I would use these in my game for enemy encounter, or I'd also do wargaming. So like the Barath Knights were actually picked to be ogre knights. I don't know what scale they are normally, but I was gonna scale them up to very big and use them as palace ogres and Kings of War. They're just super impressive and stylish, and they do not look like anything else that's out there. None of your stuff looks like you can draw inspirations from Bloodlord, Cthulhu, Castlevania, like a bunch of different things that I can see some inspirations for. But your art really is unique. It really is, even when you're taking on concepts of cool knights or evil vampires or demon frogs. You've kind of got your own vision, and you follow it more strongly than most other artists operating in this space. Is that something you're doing intentionally?
Yeah, so like I definitely have like a list of, like, for example, classic monsters that I do eventually want to approach, but I try not to start a sculpt for a month or like a release that I don't feel like I'm bringing something new to the table. I know I've been told many times that like it doesn't need to be unique every time, and while that is true, it's sort of my brand as Comet Lord to try to like, here's my take on like a vampiric knight, here's my take on the Easter Bunny, here's my take on these things. And if I could bring something new to the table, usually something that's terrifying or gothic or
in some way, yeah,
something that instills dread in your players, then it's I've done my job.
I also really love how cool all of your player characters are. Again, it does look like they could star in a video game or, solo a Capcom roster. Like I love this. You did a female crossbow ranger or rifle. This is available as either a rifle or the coolest looking crossbow I've ever seen, because instead of just a normal crossbow, it's got 4 bows and matching sets of strings and a sniper scope, and it got Victorian filigree up and down its shaft. And it's like, oh, she's here to kill a lot of vampires, like a whole metric ton of vampires. Like she's hang out with Vampire Hunter D or like the really cool Van Helsing interpretations.
Yeah, that actually was one of my fiance's characters, and we wanted to go with the like an artificer kind of gunslinger type, and eventually I wanted to do my own take on it, and even in game I was trying to really encourage that crafting aspect of an artificer. And I was giving like, oh, here's a blueprint for a pepper box sniper rifle. Here's a great crossbow that has 4 arms and a scope on it. Yeah, and it's basically I'm trying to mix a bunch of things that I really enjoy, and still try to make all the heroes or characters, like you said, like they can star in a video game, because I imagine a lot of players, you want to be a hero, or you want to be heroic, I guess, is the thing I'd be striving for, I guess.
I do like that when it went to sniper rifle, you went with pepperbox sniper rifle. It has rotating barrels in order to be the sniper rifle variant of this character, because it had to be extra, because having a gun isn't exciting enough in a fantasy setting.
Yeah. Like mentioned earlier, I made these Crimson Hunters, which is my take on a Bloodborne hunter, and I wanted to always do kind of trick weapons, because even now I love the idea of a weapon that you can, like, bonus action change it. And I was like, okay, sniper rifle, what can we do? Oh yeah, pepper box. Let's make it so this isn't like a one shot every 2 rounds or something. It's you can go all in and guns blazing, even with a sniper.
Yeah, I think
Can
it's
I
cool.
go?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I also want to just appreciate your take on the bard.
My single bard.
This model is called Adrian the Etherean Bard, and while technically that's a loot, that look like, it's got the very cool rock stage guitar, trench coat. Like this is somebody that's going to close down Waterdeep any moment now, and I love it.
Yeah, I've kind of avoided bards because they're usually, I mean, I'm not sure what to bring to the table most times, but usually in my games they're kind of contradictory to the
vibe,
because it's usually pretty cheery, or they bring sort of a different vibe to the table, right?
Yeah.
By the account of like what most players play them as. But even with a little bit of lore I wrote for this character, he's still kind of a carefree, a bit aloof, but I wanted him to have a ridiculous thing, a ridiculous attempt at a loot. It's like a double base loot at this point.
But
it also looks like it does great X damage.
That was something I was thinking about. I was like, oh, do I have this thing like transform? Maybe a bit much.
Yeah.
But let's just make it big enough and sharp enough edges that you could go full metal. This is an axe.
Well, and the lines on it and everything, I mean, just all your hero figs are so bold, and the cuts are so dramatic on all their stuff. They're actually joyful to paint too, which is something I don't think a lot of people, when they get as complex and detailed as you do, like, they can be miserable textures and stuff to get in there and try to work. But I think you've got a really great balance, especially like you kind of just to strike that kind of heroic kind of surging pose and all the detail, but like you can pick out the details, and like, yeah, like her dress right there, the filigree and stuff on the bottom of it, or whatever, the embroidery would be so fun to pick out, and it'll look great, and it's a good balance. I love it.
Yeah, I try to not go too cartoony, but also like it's the idea that you need to be able to paint it. It needs to be printable. And yeah, through the years, it's been trying to strike that balance because I don't want anyone to print my minis and then they're like looking at it as soon as they like the paint, like paintbrush touches the miniature, all the details are gone because I just etched it in like a little bit.
I also do like that your minis are eminently printable, because sometimes like you have more realistic scale to your character's builds. Like you don't go the full heroic oversized hands, oversized feet, or at least to the extremes I've seen. But your blades aren't realistic thin to the point that the second you breathe on them, they snap. You've actually got nice hefty blades. Your shafts of your weapons aren't just going to blow away the second I try to move it on the table. These models were made to be printed, and successfully and wonderfully.
Well, and you test print all your own stuff, right? Pretty much.
Yeah. Like I admit, some of the blades have gone pretty thin in the past while I was trying to like work out that like what's my style and what is printable. But yeah, it's like test printing is huge, and it's a test printing also makes sure that like the pre-supports at least work for the most standard of settings, which I try to emphasize. It's like if you're doing anything crazy, it's you're going to probably have to customize the pre-supports, but standard gray resin, standard default settings, it works.
Yeah, these little like whatever the was equivalent, the little things on the side of the sword, they survived, which usually doesn't happen to most of mine. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty fine work, and shout out to Amanda, my fiance, for doing the pre-supports, because it was a lot of like little tweaking of like, okay, can I remove these supports? No, I'm roughhousing it, but just like I don't need to go in there with like magnifying glass and clippers to make sure it doesn't break. And if the pre-supports just are going to be too tough to remove, then let's go back to the drawing board, have me like inflate them, beef them up a little bit.
Yeah, it always makes me giggle when I'm watching some of the YouTube channels for 3D printing. It's like, it's time to remove the supports, and they get the clippers out. I'm like, nobody's gonna do that. No, nobody gets in there with clippers. You're gonna grab, twist, yank, right? Maybe it's just me.
Everyone wants that like Velcro feel of it all slowly peeling off.
I mean, the first time you get a good chunky model and you just give it that twist and pull, and it comes out in one perfect piece, you never want to go back.
Yep.
That's better than peeling plastic off a brand new monitor.
True.
How do you decide what your sculpt? Like, how do you decide what you want to sculpt each month? Because like a lot of places, it's like these are proxies for obvious popular games, or these are very safe choices like dwarves and goblins and orcs and stuff. You don't do safe. And I've never seen like your stuff is not obvious proxy. So how do you decide what you sculpt each month?
I think that's probably a topic that comes up pretty often with my streams. Is I do want to do stuff that you're going to use at your table, and I had to come to the hard realization that if I want you to use it at the table, most likely I need to sculpt orcs, dwarves, or kobolds, or goblins. I have not done a pack of any of those, I don't think. But like, I have them on my list in the off chance that I have an idea where I'm like, oh, wait, I can do, I don't know, astral dwarves that like mine meteorites or something, or meteors or asteroids, and like kind of strange ideas, and I can bring a cool flair to them. But definitely in my years of doing this now, it's been a struggle of what I want to do and what is popular. When I first was running my Patreon, I ran polls, and what I learned is that no one will agree on anything. And basically, there would always be a winner, but everyone in the comment section was not happy about the winner.
Oh no.
So I stopped doing it because it was just like stressing me out, because I just felt like any choice I made was wrong, even though I left the choice up to the community.
Right.
So I just started going after things that I thought would be cool, that people could use in their games, and then doing this month after month and trying to pump out as many miniatures. The classic talk I have on my Twitch is me getting a bit burnt out, and I've had to take months off for it. But now what I try to do is, if I feel inspired by something, like, hit it while the iron's hot. And I mean, there's some things like the Oster Beast where I'm like, back in January, I'm like, okay, we're doing the Easter Bunny this year. It's going to be horrifying, but I got to wait till March so it comes out in April. Or usually, if I can, I'll try to sculpt something a month before, because I understand most people are not going to actually print my miniature for that month. Or they'll literally wait till the month release is over to pick up their files.
Because you're currently working on some really cool stuff, those rays and astral elves and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Was that a Spelljammer thing, or was it a coincidence, or how did that set kind of start materializing?
So that started materializing from the Unearthed Arcana that came out for Spelljammer, and I saw the Astral Elves, which normally I would go like, oh, look, it's another subrace of elf.
Right.
But the concept of these elves that would live for millennia, because they would go into and out of the astral plane or wild space or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
I assume there's different things. I haven't actually dived too deep, but
it used to be called the Phlogiston
in
the day.
So I had this idea, or I started, I felt inspiration reading that. And of course, I went full JRPG, mixed with the dread of Dark Souls, where I imagine, and I guess Star Wars, oddly enough.
Sure.
Where I imagine them finding, or I think the idea was astral elves went to the astral plane to get closer to their gods or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately I'm going, okay, they went there, they didn't find them. If anything, they found like ruins, and I'm like, what could they find out there? Of course I go, a moon. And I realized slowly, I'm like, this is becoming the Death Star, isn't it? So now it's like canon. I will probably unleash it upon my players, is that there is a race of elves, the astral elves, that will come every like few millennia to wipe out everything with like their planetary moon cannon. And that's how you get the D&D settings where there's ruins everywhere and magic items, because these elves show up and go like, okay, we got to reset, like clean the slate. I think it also came from Eberron, where there's the Mournlands.
Yep.
Where magic gets too out of control and you basically get like Fallout. So these elves care so much about the material plane that they're willing to just wipe the slate clean, go full Breath of the Wild, let the world kind of repopulate, regrow. But they kind of show up, canon the world, go back to the astral plane and wait a few millennia and see if you've learned your lesson.
So is the giant moon cannon going to be one of the miniatures? Because you don't seem to shy away from big.
Oh, okay. Like today, even I've been slicing up the greater astral ray that I sculpted, and I'm looking at this thing, and I feel like I need a warning of you should have an Elegoo Saturn or the equivalent if you want to print this thing in the least amount of pieces. But I know
it's
that's
big. It's big.
I know that's going to upset some people, so it's cut down into pieces for a Elegoo Mars or Sonic Mini 4K, and it's a lot of pieces. But I don't see a moon being a thing.
So with your Star Wars thing, is that your like X-wing or your? I guess the writers kind of speed biker kind of pose a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely like that. It's funny enough. Like I was already working on this idea, and then Wizards announced like, oh, there's going to be like a Lancer or like a Astral Lancer character or monster in the Spelljammer setting. I'm like, come on.
That's serendipity. It's good, right?
Yeah, like obviously no idea is like truly original, but it was
right.
Just, I even had an idea for my Mad Architect series, which is undead plus constructs, and I wanted this creature that's like a bunch of limbs grafted, and immediately everyone will go, "Oh, hey, Godric the Grafted,"
right,
from Elden Ring. Which fair enough.
I thought I had it pulled up, but it switched over to the Hydra for some reason.
I think we saw it for a second.
Yeah.
And bring it back up. But yeah, I was going to bring this up because it's just one of the examples of you always have like these like the centerpiece big old monsters in a lot of your sets. Give us some of the theory about like how do you decide like what kind of huge thing we're going to get each month?
I think it still falls under that idea of like I want you to get something awesome, and I want your players to think twice about fighting this thing. But I also understand that some people just want a display piece.
Right.
And if I can find a happy medium where you have a cool thing for your game and something you just paint up and put on your shelving unit, let's go for that. And a lot of times it's a struggle of, okay, I got to figure out what miniatures go together, because people try to, oh, we love this theme. Because I know a lot of other creators, they do like, here's this faction.
Right.
But as we've noted here, I don't entirely have safe picks. So it's kind of beneficial to do mixtures with all my releases, just so I can try to catch all kinds of folks.
Yeah, there's usually kind of a rhythm though. You've got like kind of a squad character or a character with multiple poses. You have like a big boss looking character, and then you usually have a monster. I mean, at least that's been kind of a consistent enough thing that I think, you know, people who are worried about it, like I would subscribe to you annually at this point. Like you're so consistent that I wouldn't hesitate to do that. Right. Like, and I think they're, you know, even though you have less safe picks, there's always going to be something of value there. I mean, as long as you like horrifying things, that it is really horrifying. I don't think I've looked at that one.
Yeah, it's like even when you did the corpse pile cliche monster, it's like, and then its giant hand is actually made up of like a billion giant hands all coming out, split apart right down the middle. That immediately makes you think of the worst paper cut you've ever had, and the skull is screaming itself out of flesh, and a gaping maw tummy, because the gaping maw tummies are in vogue right now.
The gaping stomach, the emaciated stomach thing. I've been called out on it so a few times now. I think it's just my flair with my creations. It kind of instills this like something's not quite right with this thing when you can see its organs.
Yeah, because then immediately soon you'll be seeing your own organs.
There we go.
Right. I definitely wanted to mention, if you're gonna check out Scott's stuff, do also check out his website, because there is some older content that's only available on his website, and it's still really cool. I think you've started kind of circling back and doing some, like, I think the Ifrit and a couple other things. You've done some newer versions that are now in your store, but some of the original poses and some of the other stuff that's still only on your website, right?
Yeah, so the stuff that's only on my website is not pre-supported because I'd been doing this Patreon release. I'd been doing the Patreon releases before pre-supporting. I think was a thing, and then I was a bit resistant on it until it became a daily message of people asking me.
Yikes.
And so I had this like 1.5 to 2 year catalog, and because I don't create that many miniatures a month, it kind of gives a bit of extra content where we can get some extra pre-supported stuff. As well, my recent pre-support was Magnus, the Dwogger Artificer. I straight up just rebuilt him
Completely,
because
yeah.
His proportions just weren't dwarf enough. They weren't like I wanted him like chunky.
I think that might make Alex. Is it Shivler? He says he likes squats, so a Dwarven Artificer probably could sneak into a squat army if you had a couple posts, depending on the rank.
And Azure Akuzero Akuzero, thank you. Akuzero says the empty stomach is perfect for storing miniatures.
You could fit the whole party in there.
Nice.
Oh, no. Oh gosh. So you've been doing this a very long time. Your website has minis going all the way back to 2019, which was not that long ago, but it's forever in resin printing years. How do you think the miniature hobby has evolved? The 3D printing miniature hobby has evolved, and where do you see it going?
Oh, that feels like we could have another like podcast or interview just for that question. It's there's some good and bad. I mean, like there is. I swear there was like a handful when I started, and I can't remember what website I checked. And it was one of those websites like STL Top or Top STL, something like that, akin to it. Where like showing all the creators, I think it listed like 257 and I'd believe it. And it's really awesome that a lot of creators can get out there because like for myself, I created my own job through this and I guess created my own brand and I've found a community and I've found support. And a lot of people are also finding this. It does get where my negativity comes from. It does get a bit dicey. Like, where does the market go when you are, or like some studios can release like 40 plus monsters, plus a module, plus art, plus this, plus that, paper miniatures, all that for the same price as little old me trying to make a couple miniatures. But besides that, like, even if we want to talk like 3D printing technology, especially as someone who wants high detail miniatures, like hearing about AK printers, it's exciting.
Have you seen the rocket printer where it's like directly like it's backwards and it's projecting down into the resin and then super fast printing because the build plate doesn't move.
That's awesome. I swear I saw something where like very early technology where it's just a vat lasers into it and it's like slowly building, and I'm like, wait, no supports.
No supports needed. Yeah, my favorites are some of the printers where it's like we put copper dust into a kiddie swimming pool and shoot lasers into it until you get a castle. I love this tech so much. I really do.
Yeah, describing it to like family members or like folks who don't know too much about it, it's usually think of Terminator being like pulled out of the ooze or like the T-1000 liquid kind of being built.
Do you still get that printing joy that, oh, look, this thing that was in my head is now in my hands a few hours later?
100%. It's I think that's what really hooked me because originally I was going to do dungeon tiles, and I had test printed through Shapeways a mimic, some sort of like boar demon, and a illusionist, which may have a remaster someday. But when I got to hold the creatures I had made, it was something else. And then quickly it was FDM printer, and then I think I went from Mimic to Storm Giant King to Two-Headed Magma Dragon. It just kind of started escalating real quick.
The natural progression.
But it's switching over to resin was just super cool. And then especially with the bigger miniatures, it's just nuts every time. And the newest one for me is getting my miniatures like professionally casted and seeing how crisp those come out. Nice. New kind of joy.
So you said professionally casted. Are you doing like physical versions?
Yeah, releasing sometime soon. Basically just try to work everything out, get everything ready. I didn't want to just release one miniature because reality is that you're going to have to pay shipping, and if you're buying just a player character, I can imagine a lot of people are going to go like, do I really want to pay that much shipping for that? Like, maybe you want to buy a few miniatures. So I've been working with Trenchworks, the folks who do the miniatures for Matt Colville's Kickstarters. So I'm kind of pulling a reverse Titan Forge, where because they went from physical to digital and digital to physical.
Right. Well, that'll be cool to hear more about when it gets ready to release. I was going to say, I think one of the cool things that our listeners might not know also is that you are highly accessible when you're doing your process. You stream everything on Twitch. Well, not everything, but you stream a lot on Twitch for your art process. Why did you decide to do that? I'm just curious. It's not very common.
I wanted to beyond just comments on like Patreon or like social media. Before the show, I said I'm not much of a social media person. But I try. But beyond the polls, which I said they kind of got a bit toxic, I wanted to interact with my community. I wanted to like hang out with people. It sounds weird every time I say it, like fans, people who are fans of my work. Just being able to interact with them. Because like before I wasn't even affiliate, or I think it's affiliate. I was just making no money, just streaming because why not? Let's hang out with people. I'm streaming to like 3 or 5 people who are silently lurking, and
Me.
Hello, 3 or 5 people silently lurking in this podcast stream.
and you're all awesome. But yeah, it's I admit now that like I've went from getting a shout out from Moist Critical, where I had like 50 people watching at once and going crazy, wondering what I'm working on. Where I was like, okay, I guess I'm streaming. I'm a streamer now. To now at a more comfortable like 10 people, 15 people, and usually it's just a set group of people chatting. But I appreciate it. It's really awesome to hang out with the community. Sometimes people are asking like questions about sculpting, even just miniatures, or hey, you want to talk about the lore? And then I can nerd out talking about the astral elf death moons and weird Easter bunny nightmares.
You also pulled up some cool reference images too to show people like what your inspiration was, and
Yeah,
that was neat.
a lot of people ask like if I draw the things out, and my response is usually nobody's got time for that. One of the miniatures that was pulled up like halfway through, the Comet Lord Emissary, was one that I did actually sketch during one of my breaks, and it definitely helps. But mostly it's I create this huge board of reference of everything I like that's inspiring this idea, and just the elements I want to take from everything and see how I can mash them together to create whatever nightmare comes out of it.
Now, I'm curious what your arsenal is like. So what software do you use to sculpt, and what printers are you using right now personally?
So everything in ZBrush. Printers, that's I just had to buy a new one because user error. I messed one up. So I mainly print things on the Elegoo Mars 2 Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an Elegoo Saturn just in case. Because there's definitely been months where I'm like, the build plate cannot support enough minis for this release to be printed quick enough. Get them all on the Saturn.
Yeah.
Here I am thinking that my Saturn's a little bit too small lately.
There's definitely like some tweaking or troubleshooting I got to do with the Saturn, but like the Elegoo Mars 2 Pro has been my like my go-to. It's the workhorse of my print station, and I usually in some of the crazier months I'm running 2 at once.
Wow. I mean, that is one of the printers that when we're asked, we recommend as a starting printer too, because maybe not the 2 Pro, but the 2 you can pick up pretty darn cheap these days.
Yeah.
Do you do any FDM printing?
No, I like. It's always a weird question when people ask if my miniatures are FDM like printable, because I would say most times no. I've only had experience with a Flash Forge Finder, which is not, from my understanding, is not a very good printer. I might be wrong. I'm so out of the loop. But so many different profiles, so many different printers. I've seen people get like near resin quality. And then other people, you can't recognize what the miniature is.
Right.
Yeah, I love FDM printing. I love resin printing, but like trying to get those resin-like quality minis on the FDM printing, that's like the dude that can like draw Mount Fuji on a grain of rice. I mean, that's a level of dedication and time investment that you could just do it on paper and it would work. You're doing that to flex that you did it is the only good reason to do it that way.
Yeah, it's I can't remember. There was someone talking on my Discord, and they brought up like FDM printing and the troubleshooting with that, and immediately I was like, yeah, that I just remember lots of swearing, sweating, late nights with trying to remove the filament that had like melted all over the nozzle, and me wondering why I'm putting myself through this.
I mean, I'm kind of glad that like we're starting to see FDM printers now that don't have that propensity for having to be like the part-time engineer to keep them going. Like I recommend the Neptune 2 all the time, and we've got like the Anchor Make, which from the reviews we're seeing that thing basically repairs itself and makes your breakfast. But yeah, it definitely is like, there's a level of time investment required to get into FDM printing that just doesn't exist for resin printing.
Yeah, like.
Oh no, Alex. Sorry. Alex says, I still have a Mars 2 Pro still in the plastic wrap it came in. I'm so sorry, Alex. I have an Ender 3 Pro that I've never opened.
My replacement's still in the box, and I have a gargantuan like astral ray that needs to be printed. So that's tomorrow's job. But yeah, I was gonna say, especially with the community of like miniature printers, you're kind of mixing like a niche hobby with like I guess D&D and like miniature stuff is sort of niche. It is like Dungeons and Dragons is growing, tabletop gaming is growing, but it's a niche hobby within a niche hobby. And then like to expect the engineering, the time to basically engineer and fix your printer is like there's a lot of layers to go through.
But Tis.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, we are out of time, but do we have anything we want to shout out to before we bounce out of here? I've got a couple of things, but of course our guest gets first pick.
I've had the whole stream to think about this, and I have no idea. I mean, if you're watching this and you don't 3D print, I believe my website has a newsletter sign up at the bottom. So if you want to be notified when I start selling like resin cast 3D printed miniatures, I won't spam you, hopefully. But yeah, that's how I'll probably be notifying people, and through my social media. Yeah, I think that's my shout out.
And where can they find your wonderful product?
So Comet Lord Miniatures on Patreon is probably the go-to. I'm also on my mini factory and cometlordminiatures.ca for my Shopify.
And your socials and Twitch?
At Comet Lord Minis and at Comet Lord Miniatures on I was going to say everything, but that's a lie. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Right. So and do make sure to go follow them on Twitch, especially to get the chance to see one of the better artists in the industry at work frequently.
Thank you.
I just want to repeat last week's shout out for the awesome Duskforge Miniatures version of Us they did, which kind of surprised us when that came in. You can pick that up for free at printyourgames.com if you want a tiny little version of me or Kristen.
And you can put us in the Oster Beast's tummy.
Oh gosh, that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen now that you've said it. I'm gonna have horrible nightmares about being eaten by the Oster Beast, and it's gonna be all your fault, Kristen. Yeah, but if you want this cool free model, it's available on our website at printyourgames.com. We thank We thank Dusk Realm Miniatures for providing that to us to give away. That was awesome of them. We super appreciate it. Also, if you want to follow what we're doing, you can do so at printergames.com, at youtube.com/printergames, at twitter.com/printergames, and also that's kind of it. But you can also email us at podcast@printyourgames.com if you want to contact us that way. And if you want to help the show out, you can give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts or all those things. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment. Many of you have already commented a whole lot. We appreciate it. And no, Alex, you are never, ever silent. Anything you want to shout out to Kristen before we sign out?
I'm going to reiterate, his backlist is awesome on his website. So Comet Lord, check out the main website too, because there's some cool old unsupported stuff. And if you can do your supports, it's not that hard. I would recommend just checking it out. And of course, don't forget to use your screen protector.
Oh, and Alex has something to shout out too that I think is important because it is here. Cura has version 5.0 out for you FDM printer types, and Tom Tullis already put out a YouTube video. Tom is a friend. He is awesome, and it was the first job I ever had in the gaming industry was helping Tom out.
Oh, cool.
All right, everybody. Until next time, we will see you later.
See ya.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.